All right, everyone. Hi. So, I'm Pastor Patrick, and you have made a metric on our fundraiser for Crescenttown United Methodist Church. So this is your first baking stream. Now, the kitchen in the parsonage is not exactly the biggest. So, I went ahead and recorded it for our enjoyment. Our first edition, you get another one here coming, and if you love them, we might think about that for Christmas. So, first one today is blueberry muffins. We had them for our bake sale at the bazaar, and they went within about 5 minutes. So, here's the ingredients that you'll need if you'd like to make them at home. This makes a batch, which makes either 6 large-size muffins or 1 dozen normal-size muffins. So, if you have muffin tins at home, normal 12 baking sheet size, that will do those amount. Or you have the Texas style, or the bakery-sized muffins, those do 6. So let me go through the ingredients for you. So there'll be some things you'll need. First off, 2 cups of flour. Baking powder is about 2 teaspoons. Salt is a ½ teaspoon. Those are all together, and all I did is just mix them up. Unsalted butter is a ½ cup or 1 stick. And then sugar is 1 1/4 cup. Now, if you do salted butter normally has about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So if you want to add another 1/4 teaspoon to the batch, you can do it that way. But salted butter has a little bit of a variable. So it could be a 1/4 teaspoon, could be an 1/8 of a teaspoon. So really up to you. But me, I use unsalted butter because then I know how much salt to put in. Up to you though. Feel free to check it out. More ingredients you'll need. Vanilla extract, a good teaspoon of that always is good. 2 large eggs, and what I normally do is I go ahead and crack them, put them in a bowl, and get them to room temperature. Same with the butter. You'll want that to be room temp, softened, so that you can work with it well. Now, it's got to be a blueberry muffin without blueberries, so you'll need 2 cups worth. Normally, the smaller containers at the grocery store, that holds about 2 cups. Normally you have a few extra, throw in your yogurt, throw in your cereal, what have you. And what I do is I wash and drain them in the container, and then I'll put them in a bowl and sprinkle flour so that they're coated. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then for my recipe, this is normally just a traditional blueberry muffin. If you wanted to do a little bit extra for some extra blueberry flavor or some more depth to it, there are some options. So here's your option ones. In the recipe I use today, there is a orange flower extract, which is called the Fiori de Sicilia. I do a few drops of that because I do a lot of baking and I use citrus a lot. So I do that. If you have a lemon, a lime, or an orange, you could probably zest it in, and that might do the same kind of concept. I'd love to hear what you think about it if you try it that way, though. Another thing I have is blueberry powder. Because I make blueberry muffins enough, I use this pretty good. It's also supposed to be really good for you if you add it to smoothies and yogurts and things. So I got a teaspoon worth for a batch. Again, for when I normally put it in, I just kind of do a light sprinkling on the top, and it kind of just slowly moves into everything. I also bought pelletized blueberry jam. It comes from King Arthur flour. That's the one I use, but if you find it from another company, normally I use about 3 tablespoons worth. Now, I know the bag that I buy, it's $18. It's kind of expensive. But if you plan on making them a bunch, they last a long time because it's pelletized and it's a container that can reseal. You can make a bunch. And normally the container holds a pound worth. So if you're making this kind of batch of muffins often, that might be worthwhile to do that. Finally, I went to a spice shop and they had blueberry sugar. And I use that as a sprinkling on top of it. I've yet to go through it because I only do a sprinkling on all of them. It's not really all that much. One thing I do also replace it with sometimes is brown sugar. So when you see me put blueberry sugar on the muffins, you can swap that out for brown sugar. I'm going to put all this ingredients in the description of the video, so feel free to look at it there. But what I'm going to do now is go ahead and show you how I make them so you can see what it looks like, and we'll walk through that, okay? So just bear with me 1 second, and we'll move over to the video. Okay, so what I have already have laid out for you is all the ingredients we'll need. So I went ahead and put the sugar in the bowl, and then I have my 1 stick of butter that's been sitting out for about 2 hours, 3 hours or so. It's not the softest it can be. If I make it in the morning, normally what I'll end up doing is putting it out overnight. And then when I get down in the morning, it is super soft and super easy for me. Normally I start with that in the bowl, but because I didn't want to get another bowl out really, I put the sugar in first. Again, it's a cup and a quarter, so I went ahead and get that mixed together. We're going through the creaming process basically, and what that happens is you get the butter broken apart and getting it smooth and fully incorporated into the sugars. It's a big deal. One of the things that most bakers will do on their own in the beginning is they'll go through things very fast because they want to make the meal, or they want to make the baked good as fast as possible. So what they'll end up doing is cutting steps time-wise and try and doing it as fast as they can. One of the things that I would suggest for you is take as long as you can. Give it a long time for each step, especially on the liquid side of things. If you decide to cut it short, it may not be fully incorporated, and then you get weird pockets when you get through the muffin. If you keep going with it and getting it fully incorporated, and it actually will feel like it's like sand, granulated sand, and with the butter, then you know it's getting fully incorporated. Normally, I'll do the creaming of the butter first, and then I'll move into the sugar and get that incorporated then. Again, when I did this way, it's a lot cleaner if you have everything in a bowl or a container ready to go, so you don't have to do all the measuring while you're working. This is what they would call, in a fancy way, mise en place, that I have everything together all at once and ready to go. So I make these muffins for you all quite often, so I know this recipe pretty well. Basically, it only takes about 15 minutes or so to go ahead and get everything incorporated into the muffin. It takes about a half hour in the oven for the big ones. It'll actually take less time with the smaller ones. And then I just gotta let them cool for a few minutes and then they're done. So within about an hour, you'll have a beautiful batch of muffins ready for breakfast. I've done it a few times with Pastor Marjorie, and we both love it a lot. So as you can see, I went ahead and incorporated the liquid ingredients except the milk. And with that, you have to put in eggs. I have the vanilla extract in there, as well as the Fiori di Sicilia extract, which is a orange flower extract. So we're going to go ahead and get that incorporated really well. This is one where the longer you go, the better. And honestly, you'll feel like, okay, I feel like it hasn't really changed all that much. When you beat eggs, it adds and whips air in it, and the protein breaks, rebonds, so that it actually will get fluffier. So if you want a fluffier muffin, you can actually work this end of it a long time and get you there. So that's what we're working through right now. And I have it on full. Sometimes what you can do is I have electric beaters here. You can also use a KitchenAid mixer or any other like standing mixer can also do it that way. I have a nice 3-quart container that holds this just right. If you wanted to double the batch, of course, you probably want to go larger. But this is probably the smallest I'd go. I've done them a few times by hand, but it does take a while on this end. You can probably do it with a whisk if you really trust in it well. I want to go ahead and show you what it looks like on the inside. So it has a buttermilk kind of color to it. If, of course, you get farm eggs and things like that, it gains a little bit different. Now, this is where the instance gets a little tricky. So we're going to do what they call a creaming method, where you add some of the dry ingredients first on a low speed and get it incorporated into your wet mixture that you've been working with. Once you get it fully incorporated, then you add some of the milk that you've reserved. Again, it's a half cup, and I'm just slowly adding that in, only doing about a third at a time. And then it basically comes and reverts back to where it looked. And then I slowly incorporate the flour mixture again. That has the baking powder in it, which is a double acting agent. It'll actually expand out here, and then it expands again when it goes in the oven. So I also have the blueberry powder incorporated in there as well. That's why my mix is a little bit grayish color. If you didn't do the blueberry powder, it would be a lot more yellowy color. It looked more like a cake mix than it does right now. The blueberry powder, it naturally will turn it grayish until it bakes, and then it creates almost like a light blue greenish texture. So again, we're just slowly going back and forth, back and forth. I like to go flour first, then milk, but you can do it the other way as well. I like to be able to get it to the right texture and not have it too runny. That's always what I kind of worry about. So I can always get a little bit more milk out of the fridge if I needed to incorporate a little bit more. But I did a little bit more with the half cup, because the one thing the blueberry powder does is it will absorb some liquid. So I add a little bit more than a half cup. It's not a lot though, so don't feel like you have to go up to like a 2/3 measure or something like that. So as you can see, that batter is taking a bit to fall down in there, which means the batter is just right. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to get a scraper, and we're going to scrape the bowl, making sure that it's fully incorporated. What we do is a light mix. What you can also do is almost like a folding nature, and it's basically you do a figure 8 kind of concept around the bowl. So just bear with me 1 second while I get that situated. Got to get all the mix there too. So you do a slight move around the edges, and then you'll slowly go through the middle. Of course, what you do is you have to add the blueberries in at some point, right? So that's the blueberries that have a little bit of flour on them. When you do it that way, the blueberries stay throughout the whole muffin rather than going and sinking to the bottom of the muffin. So I leave the rest of the flour in there. I don't need that. And that's the extra jammy bits. Those are those jam bits I talked about before. They add a little bit of punch every once in a while. This keeps the blueberries from getting beaten up. If I use the beaters, it would be more of a swirl. They would actually break apart, and the blueberry juice would then get incorporated into the muffin. I like them that way sometimes, but sometimes I actually like having a better incorporated muffin that has bursts of blueberry rather than just the streaks of it. It all depends on what you want. If you feel like you have a little bit less blueberry, what you may want to do is actually go ahead and beat them in a little bit and get them broken up, because then the blueberry juice will get well incorporated throughout the muffin. I'll also do that if I'm doing smaller muffins. So if I do smaller muffins, I worry that every blueberry may not necessarily hit every one of them. So I make sure that flavor goes throughout the whole thing. Finally, so the mix is done. We're going ahead. I'm moving everything out of the way there so we can go ahead and get moseying. That I have a already prepared muffin tin. I did not have any cupcake liners. That's what I normally use, I promise. But I didn't have any more because this is Texas size, and they're actually very hard to find sometimes. So what I do is I use one large spoon and one of my normal dinner spoons. And I just kind of scrape it down and get it into the hole so it holds the parchment paper. All you do is you cut the parchment paper into a square, you crumble it up, and then you uncrumble it, and then you push it down with your hand a little bit, and it'll make that crevice. You can do that with the little ones too, but it does get a little tedious. What I do first is get everything, a little bit of the batch in it already, just a little bit, just so that it can actually hold the parchment paper in place. And then what I'll do is slowly incorporate the rest of it and try to get them as even as possible. Unfortunately, you're never going to get it perfect. You can do an ice cream scoop if you want, but I get it everywhere that way. And what happens then is it sticks to your muffin tin, or what may happen is it may burn and incorporate it on one side. So what I do instead is I do a vegetable oil over the whole thing. So I have a spray. I just spray the whole thing, put the parchment paper down, and then I'm very careful on this end to get everything incorporated well. Well, of course, when there's cupcake liners, it's a lot easier because I'm not going to hit it. But it's okay. It works this way anyways. So again, getting it well incorporated. And what I'm also doing that you may not necessarily see is I'm trying to make sure that there are notable amount of blueberries in each of them, just so that there is at least a few different blueberries in each of the muffins. And then the pelletized jam sometimes sinks to the bottom of my mix sometimes. So I'll also make sure to kind of give each of them a bottom scrape portion as well, so that then the jam bits are also incorporated well as in the muffins too. So anyways, that's the run of it here for the muffin mixture. I'm just going to basically just kind of incorporate them in. And what I'll be doing finally is we'll be doing, after I get this fully incorporated, is doing sprinkling sugar. Now, you can do a lot of different things with this. I do a wild blueberry sugar, but that's because I found it in a spice shop. Before I found it in a spice shop, I did regular sugars, and one notably that I like is very good is if you get some brown sugar, put it in your hand, and then just take your second hand and just sprinkle a little bit on the top, just kind of like salt bee almost, right? And you get that a little bit on the top, and then what will happen is it'll encase it, and it'll actually create a crust on top of the normal muffin top. I've not had a better top to a muffin with that kind of texture, especially when it comes to the blueberry, because what'll happen is it turns into almost like a caramel crust on the top. So it has that nice buttery and rich flavor that then hits that zing of the blueberries and some of the lemon flavor in there too. So I really enjoy that. Now the wild blueberry flavor is very different than the normal blueberries that are in there. So I do like adding that to the top, and it's super good. So again, I got mine from the Spice and Tea Exchange in Frederick. However, you can get it online, or you can make your own too. Basically, it is just sugar and wild blueberry juice that's been mixed together and then let dry out with that texture on it. Again, you can kind of just incorporate different flavors. This is after making these a number of times. So it's really up to you what you like. And of course, it's not always going to be perfect, because you'll see me do something here a little bit is I inadvertently put a little too much in there, but that's okay. So what I'll do is you can get a spoon, easily scrape it apart and put it into the places you want. That's what happens when you take the containers with you. I should have put it in a bowl and then just kind of scooped one by one. But it's an easy fix. Luckily, it wasn't so much that it would be bad. So that is the end of this section. What it'll go into is a preheated oven at 350 degrees. Now, the timing really does depend. If you're doing this size, which is the nice bakery size, they'll take about a half hour. And 25 minutes, I start to check them to kind of look at them and everything. However, if you're doing the normal 12 bakery ones, they'll take less time. They'll take about 20 minutes because they're smaller. So this is what they'll look like at the end. I do this with every muffin I buy. Every muffin I make. Every muffin I make, I get a toothpick. I go through the middle. Once I see the tops looking good, I make sure that every single one of them is finished. I normally try to put it in the middle of my oven because I know if I put it on the edges, sometimes it gets a little spotty. But in the middle of the muffin, it works really, really well. So every one of those, all 6 of them look good. So I'll go ahead and give you the fun bakery shot here in a second. Mine have sat just a little bit, but you can wait a little longer. Luckily, with the parchment paper, this makes it a little easier to get out because I can lift the top part and it's not hot. Whereas if it was in a cupcake liner, I probably would use a fork to try and help pull them out a little bit. And it turned out pretty good. So let me show you what the inside looks like with the blueberry powder and with the incorporated jam bits and blueberry sugar. You can see on the top looks pretty good, kind of moved around a little bit. I like just a little bit of the blue color instead of the full brown top. Again, the parchment paper, I didn't do anything fancy cuts or anything, just a normal square and just kind of scrunched around. It makes an interesting looking muffin, I think. And here's what it looks like on the inside. So a nice light blue texture that, kind of speckles apart, and some blueberry bits that you can see they're mostly incorporated. Some of the top part, not so much, but that also is because it's a larger muffin. Sometimes they kind of move around a little bit like that. But hey, I think that looks pretty good. So that's one of the things that you may want to keep in mind. And of course, I got to test it. We got to test them out, right? Otherwise, they look pretty good to me and turned out pretty well. So a few things to keep in mind. So let me go ahead and just remind you of a few things. With those muffins, if you're thinking, hey, Pastor Patrick, that's a lot. I don't know if I could eat 6 whole ones, or I'm going to make 12. I really don't want to eat 12. Okay, this is what you can do. Once they cool, get some aluminum foil, cover each of them, and keep them pretty well tight. Normally what I do is if you're doing like breakfast sandwiches that you want to wrap and things like that, I normally wrap it with that kind of texture. Then I put it in a gallon container or a gallon bag. Try to get rid of all the air in the container, and then I put it in the freezer. They'll freeze very well. All you have to do at the end is when you pull them out, put them in a cold oven on a baking sheet or something that you can easily get to it, and then put your oven to 325 degrees. Let the oven preheat up to 325, and in the course of that time, the frozen muffin begins to become normal temperature and starts to warm. If you give it 10 more minutes after 325, they'll be normal. There'll be a nice warm texture, and all the moisture that muffin had when it froze will stay in the muffin because it steams itself on the inside. You don't need any extra browning texture on the outside. If you want to try and speed it up, you can speed it up to 340. Once you get to 350, on the other hand, 350 and above is when you actually start getting browning, and that will kind of work against you on that. So 325 really works for mine, and that's normally the timeline I do. Then you can have blueberry muffins throughout the month and throughout the week. If you ordered some, that actually will be an option if you'd like. Otherwise, that is our baking stream for today. And friendly reminder, I don't know if I put that in there. I will fix that. One thing that I don't think I have in this is... Nope. I forgot to add the milk. Not in the recipe you saw, but in the ingredient list that's there. So make sure you look in the comment in the description page. That will have the accurate numbers there for you and some of the ingredient recipe list things you'll need. Otherwise, that's our first baking stream for the season. I'll be back again on Monday, where we'll be going through our pumpkin ginger cookies, and we'll be maybe even testing out a way to make them a whoopie pie. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. Otherwise, happy baking. Enjoy your weekend, and I hope you enjoy these muffins as much as I did. Thanks.